In the heart of sun-soaked Miami, where dreams bloom and ambition cuts deep, Ava, a talented florist with a quiet strength, pours her soul into every bouquet she creates. Her flower shop, Petal Haven, is more than a business. It's her sanctuary, her lifeline, and the last thing connecting her to her late mother's memory. But just as Ava's work begins catching the right attention, whispers take root. Deliveries mysteriously go wrong, clients vanish without reason, and, behind it all, Rachel, a co-worker masked in smiles, fueled by envy and determined to watch Ava fall. Enter Ethan, a soft-spoken, thoughtful customer who keeps showing up at just the right time. What Ava doesn't know is that Ethan isn't just another admirer of flowers. He's a real estate tycoon worth millions, hiding his identity to discover one thing money can't buy: genuine connection. As Ava faces betrayal, sabotage, and heartbreak, a hidden guardian works in silence. But what happens when that silence cracks, and the truth behind Ethan's quiet support comes to light? Will Ava feel saved or deceived? This is more than a love story. It's a journey of trust, resilience, and the courage to bloom, even when the world tries to clip your roots. Subscribe now to follow Ava's fight for her dreams and discover how sometimes the most powerful love is the one that grows in the shadows. The scent of freesia, jasmine, and sea air drifted through the open door of Petal Haven, a cozy little flower shop nestled on a sun-drenched corner in Coral Gables just outside Miami. Inside, Ava Martinez wiped her hands on her apron and tucked a stray curl behind her ear as she put the finishing touches on a centerpiece for a local nonprofit's fundraiser. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, catching on the soft lavender ribbons she'd wrapped around each arrangement. It was nearly perfect, except for the mounting stack of unpaid invoices sitting beneath the counter. Ava sighed. Beauty didn't pay the rent. "Excuse me?" a voice called from the entrance, warm and mellow. She turned and saw a man in his early 30s, dressed in rolled-up sleeves, khaki chinos, and a subtle charm that didn't feel practiced. He held the door open with one hand and a folded note in the other. "Hi. I think I'm picking up flowers for a charity event?" "Oh, yes. For the Choral Arts Initiative?" she asked, stepping forward. "Give me just a second." He watched as she moved around the counter and carefully lifted a wrapped bouquet of coral peonies and cream ranunculus. The paper crinkled softly as she adjusted the bow. "Wow," he said, genuine. "That's beautiful. You made this?" "I did," she replied, a little sheepishly. They wanted something simple, but elegant. He nodded, still admiring the arrangement. "You nailed it." She offered a small smile. "Thanks. Most people only notice the flowers after they wilt." He chuckled. "Well, then those people don't deserve flowers." Ava laughed, short and soft, and handed him the bouquet. "Here you go." As he reached for it, their hands brushed, brief, warm. "I'm Ethan, by the way," he said. "Ava? Nice to meet you, Ava." He glanced around the shop, eyes trailing over the chalkboard menu listing bouquet styles and the wall of Polaroids featuring customers with their arrangements. "This place feels different," he said, "like someone actually cares." Ava shrugged, a little caught off guard. "I do. I try. It was my mom's dream before it was mine. She opened it 20 years ago. Is she still here?" "She passed away 3 years ago," Ava said quietly. "But this shop's the best part of her I still have." Ethan nodded with respect, his expression softening. "You're doing her proud," he said. For a moment the air felt still, like the noise of the outside world had hushed to let the words settle. Then Ava cleared her throat. "Anyway, the flowers are already paid for." "Right." Ethan hesitated as if there was something else he wanted to say. "Well, I'll be back. I'll probably have more events to pick up for." She smirked. Or maybe just come in and buy a bouquet next time like a normal customer? He grinned. Deal. As he left, the bell over the door chimed softly. Ava watched him disappear into the bright Miami afternoon, a flicker of curiosity rising inside her. She turned back to her work just as Rachel, her co-worker, emerged from the back room with a box of hydrangeas. Was that the guy from Choral Arts? Rachel asked, too casually. Yeah, Ethan. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You looked a little flushed. Cute guy? Ava rolled her eyes. He was just picking up flowers. Rachel smirked, but something in her gaze lingered a little too long on the door he'd just exited. Outside, Ethan walked down the street toward his parked car and pulled out his phone. A few missed calls, a dozen unread emails, and a message from his assistant reminding him about the investor lunch at noon. He exhaled, back to reality. Because Ava didn't know he wasn't just some guy picking up flowers. He was Ethan Reyes, CEO of Coral Ventures, one of the most influential real estate developers in South Florida. And, for the first time in a long while, he didn't want to be seen for that. He just wanted to be seen by her. The following Monday, the shop felt heavier. The scent of gardenias drifted through the air, but it didn't carry the same comfort it usually did. Ava clipped the stems of bright yellow roses, trying to push through the tightness in her chest. Her focus kept slipping. It had been a quiet weekend, and she'd spent most of it thinking about Ethan, about his smile, the way he really listened, and how her laugh had come so easily around him. It felt too natural, too safe for someone she'd barely met. But she didn't have time for daydreams. Morning, Rachel said, breezing in with her oversized iced coffee and a smile just shy of sweet. Ava forced a smile. Morning. Rachel walked past, pausing to glance at the arrangement Ava was working on. Those roses are a little bright, don't you think? That client wanted something understated. Faye blinked. I followed the palette they approved last week. Rachel shrugged. Just saying, don't be surprised if they cancel. Clients are fickle. Ava didn't respond, but a tiny coil of anxiety pulled tight in her stomach. By midday, that anxiety bloomed into reality. A notification pinged on the shop's shared email. Subject: Order cancellation. Mendez and Camus. Corporate luncheon. Ava read the message twice. It was vague, apologetic, and final. One of their biggest upcoming orders, gone without warning. Rachel peered over her shoulder. Oh, wow. That's rough. What happened? I don't know, Ava murmured. They didn't say. Rachel clicked her tongue. You sure it wasn't that bold color scheme? Ava swallowed the lump in her throat. Maybe. But something didn't sit right. Later that evening, after closing, Ava took a long walk down the beach. The shoreline was nearly empty, lit by the soft gold of a sinking sun. She slipped off her sandals and walked barefoot through the sand, phone in hand, but untouched. And then, as if summoned by thought alone, her phone buzzed. Ethan, any chance you're near the ocean right now? It feels like a good place to end a Monday. She stared at the message, a surprised smile tugging at her lips. Ava, actually, I'm here now, 27th Street, barefoot and slightly annoyed. 5 minutes later, Ethan appeared, his hair windswept, casual in sneakers and a linen shirt. You always walk it off like this? He asked, falling into step beside her. When I can't fix a problem, yeah, she said. Today's was a big one. He waited. One of our largest clients canceled out of nowhere, she continued. No warning, just gone. It's not the first time lately either. Ethan frowned. Do you think someone's trying to sabotage your work? Ava hesitated. No, I mean, I don't want to believe that, but something feels off. There's this tension at the shop, like I'm being watched, or second-guessed. He nodded slowly, filing away every word. "Maybe someone's intimidated by your growth," he offered. "That happens more often than people admit." Ava gave a tired laugh. "I haven't grown that much." "You've grown enough to threaten someone who didn't expect you to." She looked at him surprised. "You sound like you've seen that before." "I've lived it," he said. "The more you rise, the quieter the envy creeps in." They walked in silence for a few minutes, the waves brushing at their feet. "Thanks for meeting me," she said softly. "I didn't come to fix it," Ethan replied. "I just came to walk with you." Ava smiled, eyes glinting with something unspoken. Neither noticed Rachel sitting in her car across the street, watching them through tinted glass. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never had. 2 weeks after the Mendes and Kobe cancellation, Ava's fortunes seemed to bloom from the most unexpected soil. The call came early on a Thursday morning. Ava was elbow-deep in peonies, prepping orders for a bridal shower, when the shop phone rang. "This is Ava," she answered, brushing petals from her apron. "Hi, this is Serena Myers from Serena Celebrates. I run a boutique wedding planning firm. One of my colleagues shared your work from a recent fundraiser, and I have to say, I was blown away." Ava blinked. "You saw my work?" "I did. The coral peonies and ranunculus centerpiece. Bold, but intentional. I'd love to feature your arrangements at a wedding I'm planning in Coconut Grove next month. Big-name client, high visibility. Are you interested?" Ava's heart skipped. "Yes, absolutely. I'd love to." "Wonderful. I'll send the event details this afternoon." As Ava hung up the phone, her hands trembled, half from excitement, half from disbelief. The coral peonies, the exact arrangement Ethan had picked up. She looked out the front window of the shop and smiled to herself. Somehow, he had something to do with this. Unbeknownst to her, Ethan had met Serena at a private industry dinner the week before. When he overheard her talking about needing a floral designer with a clean, tropical aesthetic, he didn't hesitate. "I know someone," he'd said, casual but sincere. "She's under the radar, but not for long." He hadn't dropped Ava's name as a favor. He dropped it because it deserved to be known. Back at Petal Haven, the news of the Serena Celebrates contract spread quickly. Customers began filtering in with curiosity, asking if they could place orders styled like those wedding pieces. Ava had to bring in an extra part-time helper just to keep up with the demand. Rachel watched from the register, lips pressed tight. Her carefully planted doubts, her little client nudges, her whisper campaigns, all of it had failed. Ava was shining again, brighter than ever. And worse? She was happy. Rachel pulled out her phone and tapped open Ava's Instagram, scrolling past new photos of flawless floral installs and smiling brides. A new face kept showing up in the tagged pictures. Ethan, dinner shots, sunset walks, a blurry image of the two laughing over coffee. Rachel narrowed her eyes. Who was this guy? He didn't seem like the other vendors Ava worked with. He wasn't promoting anything, selling anything, or tagging a business page. He just kept being there. Too often, too conveniently. Meanwhile, Ava stood across from Ethan at a waterfront cafe that evening, her cheeks pink from the ocean breeze and laughter. "Okay," she said, leaning on the table. "I've had a suspiciously lucky streak lately." "Is that so?" he asked, smiling. She sipped her lemonade. "Big name wedding. Press mentions. A bride who wants me to do all 4 of her sister's weddings next year. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Ethan raised a brow, playful. Maybe the universe finally caught up. She gave him a look. He relented. "Okay, I might have mentioned you to someone, once, lightly." Ava chuckled. "Just lightly?" He shrugged. "Your work speaks for itself. I just turned up the volume." For a second, the warmth in his voice wrapped around her like a soft tide. "You know," she said, quieter now, "I didn't realize how much I needed someone in my corner until you showed up in it." He met her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the pink and orange streaks dance across the bay. Neither of them saw Rachel parked 2 blocks away, watching from a distance, camera lens extended. She snapped a photo and smiled. Because now, she had a new angle. The morning of the Santiago wedding dawned bright and balmy, perfect weather for a beachside ceremony. The kind of day planners pray for and florists dream about. Ava had arrived at the venue early, her van packed with crates of delicate orchids, sunset-hued roses, and powder-blue hydrangeas. She moved through the prep team like a conductor, guiding, adjusting, perfecting. This wedding was a milestone, not just for Petal Haven, but for her. Ava double-checked the order list one last time and nodded. Time to bloom. But an hour later, just as the ceremony chairs were being arranged in perfect arcs, her assistant, Kiana, came sprinting from the delivery van, panic in her voice. "Ava, you need to see this." Ava followed her to the back of the van, heart hammering. The moment the doors opened, her breath caught. Nearly half the arrangements, dozens of centerpiece boxes and aisle runners, were wilted, brown-edged, limp, unusable. "What in the world?" Ava murmured, reaching for a petal that crumbled between her fingers. "They weren't like this when we packed them," Kiana said, stunned. "I checked the cooler before we left." Ava's mind raced. The flowers had been refrigerated, hydrated, prepped. There was no reason they should have wilted this quickly. Unless someone had taken them out, or switched them, and only 2 people had access to the shop's back storage. Her and Rachel. By the time guests began to arrive, Ava had regrouped the few arrangements that were still intact, trimming them, repurposing petals, filling space with fresh greenery. It wasn't her original vision, but it was clean, cohesive, passable. Still, the bride noticed. "This wasn't what we agreed on," Mrs. Santiago said, her eyes narrowing. "Where are the orchids we approved?" Betty swallowed hard. "We had a last-minute delivery issue, but I'm doing everything I can to—" "I don't want excuses," the bride snapped. "I want what I paid for." Before Ava could respond, another voice spoke from behind her. "Excuse me. I'm with the vendor team. The arrangements are being refreshed now. I've already contacted another supplier to bring fresh orchids. They'll be here in 20 minutes. Ava turned, stunned, to see Ethan, hands in his pockets, calm and collected, looking every bit like he belonged on site. Mrs. Santiago blinked. "You're with the floral vendor?" Ethan smiled warmly. "Tonight, I am." The bride eyed him, then Ava before muttering, "It better be fixed." As she walked away, Ava pulled Ethan aside, disbelief still on her face. "How did you know?" "I saw your assistant run out looking like someone stole her wedding dress," he said. "Figured something was wrong. But how did you get replacements so fast?" Ethan shrugged, understated. "I have a few contacts in event logistics." Ava narrowed her eyes. "You always have perfect timing. You know that?" He gave a small smile. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere." Ava's chest tightened. She wanted to ask more, how he always managed to fix things like he had a secret window into her life. But she couldn't afford the questions. Not yet, not with the ceremony 30 minutes away. That night, the wedding was saved. Guests were none the wiser. The replacement orchids arrived in time. The sunset was breathtaking, and Ava stood by the shore, barefoot in the sand, the tide brushing her toes as the couple danced under lantern lights. It should have felt like a victory. But when she returned to the shop later that night, her suspicions were confirmed. In the trash bin beside the back cooler, hidden beneath floral clippings, Ava found 2 large bouquets of fresh orchids, the exact ones she'd prepared for the wedding. Untouched, unused. Someone had taken them out on purpose, and that someone had a key. Ava stared down at the petals. Rachel had drawn blood. And this time, Ava wouldn't let it go. The following week, Ava arrived at Petal Haven just after sunrise, determined to take back control of her shop. The events of the Santiago wedding still weighed heavy on her, especially the orchids she'd discovered discarded behind the cooler. She hadn't confronted Rachel yet, not because she was afraid, but because she needed proof. Cold, undeniable proof. As she unlocked the door, she spotted Rachel already at the work table, hunched over her sketchbook. She looked up with a tight smile. "You're here early," Rachel said, flipping the cover closed. "Big week," Ava replied, hanging up her bag. "That design consult with the glass house is tomorrow." Rachel's smile tightened. Right, the big client. Ava nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch. The Glass House Hotel had recently reached out looking for a permanent floral partner for all their private events, a dream contract. Ava had prepped for the pitch for days, assembling mood boards, arranging samples, even designing a bespoke floral bar concept. But when she logged into the shared drive that afternoon, her stomach dropped. The presentation file, the one she had poured hours into, was gone. In its place, a sleek, polished PDF labeled Glasshouse Proposal, Rachel see her final.pdf. She opened it, heart pounding. It was her concept, nearly word for word. Same layout, same design language, even the floral bar idea, slightly reworded, but unmistakably hers. Her fingers trembled on the mouse. Rachel had stolen her work, and submitted it under her own name. That night, Ava sat on the patio of a small Cuban cafe in Little Havana, fingers curled around a paper cup of café con leche. Across from her, Ethan watched her with quiet concern. "She stole it," Ava said, voice hoarse. "Everything I've worked on. The concept, the sketches, the presentation. I know it's her. I just can't prove it." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You said the files were saved on a shared drive, right?" "Yes." "Do you use cloud sync or internal storage?" "Cloud. Why?" He tapped his fingers thoughtfully. "Cloud systems log access timestamps, IP addresses, even file changes. If you want, I can have someone look into it." Ava hesitated. "Ethan, I appreciate you always being here for me, really. But I can't keep leaning on you like this." "You're not leaning," he said. "You're standing. I'm just keeping the ground steady." A small laugh escaped her. "That was poetic." He grinned. "I have my moments." Then he grew serious again. "Let me help. Not because I think you need rescuing, but because you deserve to win on your terms." Ava stared at him, something flickering in her eyes. She nodded. "'Kay? Just this once." Back at the shop, Rachel sat at her desk, scrolling through photos on her phone. Screenshots of Ethan and Ava, candid moments, blurred angles, captured from a distance. She had folders now, labeled, dated, sorted. If Ava wanted to keep winning, Rachel would make sure the world saw what she really was. A girl with luck, not talent. A florist with a secret benefactor. Rachel clicked on Ethan's name in her search bar, and after a few tries, finally hit gold. Ethan Reyes, CEO of Coral Ventures. Her eyes widened. A small, triumphant smile crept across her face. No wonder Ava's star kept rising. It wasn't sunlight. It was shadow. His shadow. and Rachel was ready to drag them both into the light. The Grand Palm Floral Expo was a landmark event in Miami, an annual gathering of the region's most celebrated florists, designers, and industry leaders. For years, Ava had attended as a curious observer, never imagining she might one day showcase her own work. So, when the expo coordinator reached out with a last-minute invitation to join the featured showcase lineup, Ava was stunned. "We've had a cancellation," the email read. "Your recent wedding work came highly recommended. Would you be able to present on short notice?" Ava stared at the screen, heart thudding. She didn't know who had recommended her. She didn't ask. She just said yes. Across the city, Ethan closed his laptop with a small, satisfied nod. He'd called in a quiet favor, nothing flashy, nothing traceable, just a well-placed nudge from someone who owed him one. He knew Ava could shine if given the stage. All she needed was the chance, and he wanted to give it to her, without taking it from her. At the expo, Ava stood beside her custom display, an ethereal archway made of pampas grass, ivory orchids, and dried citrus slices, a soft blend of elegance and earthiness. It took her 12 hours to design and nearly 6 to assemble, but it was hers, from stem to silhouette. She watched as attendees stopped, stared, and lingered. Some took photos, others asked questions. Even the media rep from Floral Digest scribbled notes in her leather-bound journal. When the announcer called Ava up for a brief Q&A session, her palms sweated, but her voice held. "This design is about resilience," she said, "about blending softness with structure. I wanted to reflect the way we learn to grow through unpredictable seasons." Ethan stood toward the back, unnoticed by the crowd, hands in his pockets and heart full. He'd never seen her so grounded, so unapologetically herself. And, somehow, that made him even more afraid to tell her the truth. Back at the shop that night, Ava's phone buzzed with messages, compliments, vendor inquiries, even an invite for a podcast interview. Rachel glanced up from the register, trying to mask the tightness in her jaw. "Big night?" she asked. Ava tucked her phone into her bag. "Yeah." The expo was incredible. Rachel forced a smile. "Well, good for you." But behind her back, her mind was spinning. She had spent the past 2 days deep in research, company records, real estate journals, and old event photos. And it all pointed to one truth. Ethan Reyes wasn't some flower-loving friend. He was the man behind Coral Ventures, one of the wealthiest and most private developers in South Florida. And yet, here he was, lurking quietly around Ava's world like a humble sidekick. Rachel couldn't decide what disgusted her more, the lie or the way Ava kept rising because of it. That night, she opened her photo folder again. The blurry shots, the intimate moments, the expo crowd where Ethan lingered just close enough to be noticed by someone paying attention. And Rachel was paying attention. Meanwhile, Ethan and Ava sat on the tailgate of his truck under a sky strewn with stars, eating mango popsicles from a roadside stand and trading soft laughter. "You were amazing today," Ethan said. "I was terrified," Ava admitted. "But you didn't show it." She leaned her head on his shoulder for a moment. "Feels like everything's finally moving forward. Like I'm not stuck in survival mode anymore." Ethan hesitated, then said, "You deserve that." She turned to look at him. "So do you." Their eyes met in a moment that felt almost suspended, vulnerable, unguarded. But before either could speak, Ava's phone buzzed. She checked it, then frowned. "Rachel just sent me a photo," she murmured. "It's from the expo. You were in it." Ethan's blood ran cold. She said, "Interesting guest for someone who claims he's just a fan of flowers." Ava looked up at him, suddenly still. "Ethan, who are you really?" Ethan stood on the edge of Biscayne Bay, the breeze tousling his hair as waves lapped softly at the docks. His phone was still in his hand. The image from Rachel burned into the screen, and into his thoughts. He hadn't responded to Ava yet. He didn't know how, because the truth was no longer just a quiet omission. It was a threat, and the person holding it now was Rachel. The text had come just minutes after Ava's. "Rachel, we need to talk. Alone. I know who you are. Meet me at Flamingo Point, 6 p.m. Don't be late." At 6 p.m. sharp, Ethan arrived at the Overlook. Rachel was already there, leaning against the railing with arms crossed and a smugness that felt like armor. "I was wondering how long you'd keep playing the humble admirer card," she said without looking at him. "CEO of Coral Ventures, hiding out in a flower shop like some rom-com extra." Ethan didn't flinch. "What do you want?" She turned to face him. "Let's be clear. I don't care about you, but I do care about what you've done. Hand-feeding Ava Press, expo spots, clients. You've manufactured her rise." "No," he said firmly. "I gave her opportunities. She earned every win." Rachel snorted. "Semantics." Ethan stepped closer. "Is this blackmail?" "It's a warning," she said smoothly. "Walk away from Ava. Stop greasing the wheels. Let her fail on her own, like the rest of us." He stared at her. "Or what?" Rachel held up her phone. "Or I make a few calls. A leaked tip to Floral Digest. Maybe a post to a gossip blog. The narrative writes itself. Ava Martinez, Miami's favorite florist, is just the girlfriend of a real estate mogul handing her success on a silver platter." She paused, eyes gleaming. "You think the community that supported her rise won't turn the second they think she's a fraud?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "Why are you doing this?" "Because she didn't earn it. I watched her get lucky while the rest of us grind. You handed her everything while I worked for scraps." Ethan shook his head slowly. "You're not angry because she didn't earn it. You're angry because she never needed to cheat to shine." Rachel's eyes flashed. Ethan took a breath. "I'm not stepping away. And if you go after her, I will go public. Every favor, every lie, every sabotage. And unlike you, I have people who listen." Her smile faltered. He turned to leave, but her voice followed him like smoke. "You think she'll still trust you when she finds out everything? All the strings you pulled? You may have saved her business, Ethan, but you broke her trust doing it." Ethan didn't turn around. But the weight of those words stayed with him long after he walked away. That night, Ethan sat in his apartment overlooking the bay. The city lights shimmered on the water, but his thoughts were anything but calm. He opened his notes app and started typing. "Ava, there's something I need to tell you. No more half-truths." But before he could finish, his phone buzzed. "Ava, hey. I've been thinking. I want to talk. In person. Tomorrow?" He stared at the message, heart racing. She was still giving him a chance. But how much longer would that last? Meanwhile, Rachel sat alone in the break room at Petal Haven, a cold smile on her lips. Her tip had already been scheduled to post on an anonymous industry forum the next morning. A headline designed to spread fast. Petal Haven's star. Florist or CEO's darling. Miami's bloom queen and the secret behind her success. The timing was perfect. And this time, Rachel wasn't just cutting stems. She was cutting roots. The next morning, Ava's phone buzzed with a dozen notifications before she'd even stepped out of bed. Her heart sank as she read the subject lines. Insider tip. Miami florist's secret sponsor? Social climber or self-made? Petal Haven's controversial rise. Is Ava Martinez really the bloom queen? Or just the CEO's favorite? She blinked, stunned, and clicked into the posts. Anonymous commenters had already begun dissecting every event Ava had worked in the past 6 months, speculating on Ethan's involvement. Screenshots, blurry photos. The narrative was clear and cruel. Her hands trembled. By the time she arrived at Petal Haven, the silence inside the shop said everything. The energy had shifted. 2 clients had canceled their appointments. An employee avoided eye contact. Rachel stood near the register, casually scrolling through her phone. Ava approached the counter. "Did you see this?" Rachel didn't even look up. "Hard not to. It's all over the forums." Fethius clenched her jaw. Someone leaked internal shop photos. Rachel finally looked at her, all faux concern. "You think someone from here did it?" "I think someone had a motive." Rachel's smile was almost imperceptible. "Or maybe the truth just caught up with you." Ava stepped back like she'd been slapped. It wasn't the rumors that hurt most. It was how real they now felt. Was everything she'd built going to be reduced to someone else's money? Someone else's power? Later that afternoon, Maribel, the shop's owner, called Ava into the office. Her expression was tight, her voice measured. "We've had 5 cancellations today," she began, "and a few inquiries asking about the articles." "I had nothing to do with what's being said," Ava replied, her voice cracking. "I built this. I've worked harder than—" "I know," Maribel cut in. "But this is about perception now. Until we can clear your name, I have to place you on temporary leave." Ava froze. "What?" "I'm sorry, Ava. I believe you, but the shop's reputation is on the line." Just like that, she was out. Her keys felt heavy in her palm as she walked home that evening. Her steps were slow, her spirit hollow. Everything she'd nurtured was slipping through her fingers. And the worst part, Ethan hadn't said a word. Not a call, not a text, nothing. She felt small, foolish, exposed. She sat on the floor of her living room that night, surrounded by discarded sketches and dried petals, her head resting against the wall. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. Not for the shop, not for the articles, but for the truth that she'd trusted someone who never told her his. Elsewhere in the city, Ethan stood alone in his office, phone in hand, Ava's last text still unread. He had tried to draft a message, something honest, something that would explain everything, but nothing sounded right. Cam, his longtime assistant, stood in the doorway. "We traced the leak. The metadata from the post links back to Rachel. It's airtight." Ethan stared at him. "Too late now." "Not if you speak up." "She won't listen." Cam stepped forward. "Then make her see. Don't hide behind her pain because you're scared of causing more. Fight for her." That same night, Ava opened her inbox and found a single message with no sender name. Subject: "Truth you deserve attached were files. Time-stamped documents, a full forensic breakdown, all pointing to one name. Rachel." Ava stared at the screen, heart pounding. Someone had gone to great lengths to get her this information. And for the first time in days, something inside her sparked again. Not anger, resolve. She wouldn't go down quietly. Ava stood at the small breakfast counter in her apartment, her laptop open, eyes locked on the documents she'd received the night before. Every timestamp, every IP address, every detail had been carefully laid out, and every thread pointed to Rachel. She felt a storm of emotions: rage, betrayal, but also a flicker of something steadier, purpose. She couldn't go back to Petal Haven just yet, but she wasn't going to sit still either, so she called someone she hadn't spoken to in years. "Hi, Aunt Lucia. It's Ava. I need your help." Lucia owned a small event planning firm on the outskirts of Little Havana. It wasn't high-end, but it had loyal clientele and deep community roots. When Ava explained what had happened, Lucia didn't hesitate. Mi reina. They can't take your name if you build it again from scratch, she said. You've got hands, you've got heart, and you've got me. By that evening, Ava had secured her first freelance gig, a backyard wedding with a couple who'd followed her work online for months and didn't care about the gossip. In fact, they refused to believe it. You made my sister's bridal shower magical, the bride-to-be told her over the phone. That doesn't come from someone faking their way through flowers. For the first time in days, Ava smiled. She was going to rebuild. With or without a shop. With or without Ethan. Meanwhile, Ethan sat across from Cam in a quiet corner of his office. She's rebuilding already? Cam asked, sliding his tablet across the table to show Ava's newly launched freelance florals page. She's stronger than I ever gave her credit for, Ethan murmured, and I hate that I've become the silence in her storm. Cam leaned in. Then don't be. We've got enough to go public. Rachel's IP address, the fake receipts she filed, even audio of her bragging about it at that rooftop bar. It's airtight. Ethan looked out the window at the Miami skyline. It's not about just clearing her name anymore. It's about how we do it. He stood. Quietly, professionally, and without dragging her into another media circus. Cam raised an eyebrow. So, what's the play? Ethan picked up his phone. We start with her boss. The next morning, Maribel sat at her desk, staring at the email that had landed in her inbox. No name, no sender. But what it contained made her blood run cold. Rachel's email history. Proof of her leaking client information. Tampering with invoices. Forwarding Ava's designs to her personal contacts. Maribel sat back in her chair, stunned. She had placed the wrong woman on leave. And now, she was going to fix it. Back at her aunt's shop, Ava was elbow-deep in ivory peonies when her phone rang. It was Maribel. I owe you an apology, her former boss said softly. I've reviewed new evidence. I know you didn't leak those stories, and more importantly, I know who did. Ava's chest tightened. Rachel? Yes. She's being suspended pending investigation. And if you ever want your spot at Petal Haven again, it's yours. Ava was silent for a moment. Then she exhaled slowly. Thank you, but I need to finish something first. She glanced at the row of hand-labeled vases lined up in front of her, each one a new promise. She was rebuilding her life, not to prove something to the world, but to herself. That night, Ethan parked outside her apartment building but didn't get out. He watched the lights on in her window, the silhouette of her arranging blooms at the counter, alone, determined. He gripped the steering wheel, then reached for his phone again, typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, he hit send. Ethan. I never meant for it to happen like this, but if you'll let me, I'd still like to tell you everything, in person, no more secrets. The message delivered, and all he could do now was wait. The Coral Bloom Showcase was one of Miami's most talked-about seasonal events, a curated garden of installations from the city's rising florists, held at an upscale downtown conservatory beneath glass ceilings and hanging orchids. This was Ava's first appearance since the scandal broke, and nerves churned in her stomach as she stepped onto the venue floor. But she wasn't here for redemption. She was here to work. The bride and groom, a quiet, artistic couple, had trusted her with their engagement celebration centerpiece. With her head held high and her heart steady, Ava moved through her setup, arranging lavender thistle and golden ranunculus with the kind of precision only pain and perseverance could teach. Everything was going smoothly, until Rachel arrived. Dressed sharply in cream, clipboard in hand, she strolled through the venue like she owned it. She was not on the official vendor list, but she had sweet-talked her way in under the guise of logistics consultant. And she had a plan. Just after Ava finished setting the final bouquet, Rachel approached the event organizer. "I'm sorry, but there's been an issue," she said smoothly. "I need to report a theft. That florist," she nodded subtly toward Ava, "used my original design without credit." The organizer blinked. "You're saying Ava Martinez stole your work?" "She took a private sketch I submitted weeks ago and passed it off as hers. I can prove it." Within minutes, a tense circle formed around Ava's setup. Guests looked on, murmuring. Cameras clicked. Rachel stood smugly at the center, projecting concern with every false word. Ava's face flushed. "This is a lie," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "I created this from scratch. I have the drafts, the mood board, everything." The organizer hesitated, caught in the chaos, until another voice cut through the room. "Actually," came the calm, authoritative tone, "you'll want to hear my proof." Heads turned as Ethan stepped forward, crisp in a navy suit, his presence commanding instant attention. Ava's breath caught in her throat. Rachel's smile faltered. Ethan faced the crowd, holding a tablet. "I'm Ethan Reyes, CEO of Coral Ventures, and for the past month I've been tracking a pattern of professional sabotage orchestrated by Rachel Green against Ava Martinez." He turned the tablet to the organizer. "Here's Rachel forwarding Ava's private sketches to herself. Here's her sending those same files to vendors under her name. And here," he swiped again, "is the audio of her admitting to it at Pierstone Lounge last Thursday." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rachel's face went pale. "This isn't just unethical," Ethan continued. "It's theft and defamation." The organizer stepped back. "We'll need to ask you to leave," she told Rachel sharply. Rachel opened her mouth to protest, but nothing came out. She turned and stormed off, heels echoing like a closing gavel. The crowd shifted its attention back to Ava. But Ava's eyes were on Ethan. He walked toward her slowly, carefully, like he knew he'd already broken something. "I wanted to let you fight your way through this on your own," he said softly, "but not at the cost of your name." She looked at him stunned. "Your Coral Ventures." He nodded. "And I should have told you sooner. But everything I did because I believe in you, not because you needed me, but because I needed you to know you were never alone." The pain in her chest rose like a tide, part disbelief, part relief, part heartbreak. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Then don't," he said, eyes earnest. "Not yet. Just know that this wasn't about saving you. It was about standing beside you." The applause began quietly, first from the bride, then from the guests, and finally, from the organizer herself. Ava blinked through tears, overwhelmed by the moment. She wasn't cleared just by truth. She was restored by it. The evening glow spilled through Ava's apartment windows as she sat curled on her sofa, still in her showcase dress. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, mind spinning like petals caught in a sudden breeze. The crowd's applause still echoed in her ears, but it didn't drown out the ache sitting heavy in her chest. Ethan had saved her. Again. But he had also lied. Again. A soft knock at her door pulled her from the spiral. She knew it was him before she opened it. Ethan stood on the threshold, his expression open, vulnerable. No suit this time, just jeans and a soft blue shirt rolled at the sleeves. For once, he looked like the version of himself she had met in the shop, the man who had asked questions instead of giving answers. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. She nodded, stepping aside. They sat in silence for a moment, the space between them thick with unspoken questions. "I didn't want you to find out like that," Ethan began, his voice low, "but I couldn't let Rachel drag you down. Not again." "You could have told me weeks ago," Ava replied, barely above a whisper. "You watched me drown, Ethan. You watched me question everything and said nothing." "I was scared," he admitted. "Not of losing you because of what Rachel did, but of losing you because of who I am." Ava looked at him, eyes shimmering. "You think I'd be scared off by a title?" "No," he said, leaning forward. "But I've been in relationships where my name, my money, overshadowed everything. Where people smiled at the Ethan Reyes on paper but never cared to know the Ethan who drinks grocery store coffee and hates networking events." She let out a breath, her guard softening just slightly. "I wanted to be real to you, Ava. Not a CEO, just a guy who loved flowers. And then, somewhere along the way, I started to love you, and that made it harder to tell the truth, not easier." The room fell quiet again. Ava rose and walked toward the kitchen, needing the motion to sort through her thoughts. "I understand why you hid," she said finally, turning back to him. "But do you understand what that cost me? Every time I felt alone, every time I thought I had no one in my corner, you were there, but I didn't know. You let me carry that weight thinking no one believed in me. I did believe in you," Ethan said, rising. "So much it scared me." They stood facing each other, two people on opposite banks of the same river, each waiting for the other to build the bridge. "You don't get to disappear when it's convenient," Ava said, voice steadier now. "If you want to be in my life, really be in it, then you don't hide when it gets messy." "I don't want to hide anymore," he said softly, "and I'll spend as long as it takes proving that to you." A long silence passed between them, and then Ava finally spoke. "I'm not ready to forgive you. Not yet, but I'm not ready to lose you either." Ethan's eyes met hers, a small smile forming. "That's enough, for now." Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Maribel. "Maribel, Rachel has been officially terminated. I owe you more than an apology. How about a meeting tomorrow morning to talk about next steps?" Ava read it, exhaled, and looked back at Ethan. "The fallout's not over, but maybe. The rebuilding can start," he nodded. "I'll be wherever you need me to be. Front row, back row, or just holding the ladder while you rise." For the first time that night, she smiled. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was hope. Ava stood outside the doors of Petal Haven, heart pounding. The same entrance that had once felt like home now pulsed with uncertainty. Her fingers brushed against the grant letter tucked inside her tote, a $25,000 award from the South Florida Small Business Initiative to expand her freelance floral business. She hadn't expected to win, but maybe, after everything, it was finally her time. She stepped inside to find Maribel waiting in the lobby, dressed in soft coral and holding 2 cups of coffee. "I got your favorite," Maribel said, handing Ava a caramel oat milk latte. "Welcome back." Ava hesitated before taking it, offering a small smile. "Thanks. I didn't know if I'd ever walk through those doors again." "I didn't know either," Maribel replied honestly. "But I was wrong, Ava, and I want to make it right." They walked toward the break room, where bouquets wrapped in cellophane lined the tables, client orders ready for delivery. It looked just like it had before everything changed. "I heard about the grant," Maribel continued. "Congratulations, you've earned every bit of it." "Thank you," Ava said, her tone careful. "I've decided to use it to open a small design studio. Something personal, intimate, not just retail flowers, custom installations, creative workshops, sustainable designs." Maribel nodded, pride flickering behind her eyes. "I always knew you'd outgrow this place." "I'm not walking away bitter," Ava added, "but I need something that's truly mine, built with intention, not just tradition." Maribel took a sip of coffee, thoughtful. "Would you be open to a partnership? Petal Haven sponsoring your workshops? Sharing clients for big events? Ava blinked, surprised. You'd do that? You reminded all of us that growth isn't just about profit. It's about purpose, Maribel said, and it's time I supported that, instead of trying to control it. Ava looked around the shop one last time. I'd like that. Let's do something that makes the community proud. Later that week, Ava and Ethan stood in the sunlit corner of an empty brick storefront in Wynwood. The lease had been signed just that morning. Dust swirled in beams of light, but Ava saw more than an empty room. She saw a possibility. "This is the space?" Ethan asked, spinning slowly as he took it in. "Yep," she said, grinning. "My new creative studio. I'm calling it Wild Root." Ethan laughed softly. "Of course you are." "I want it to feel like freedom," Ava said. "Not just bouquets, but a space where people can find beauty without rules. Color outside the lines." "I'd like to help," Ethan offered, stepping closer. "As a partner, silent or not, whatever you need." Ava hesitated. "You've already done so much." "I want to do this with you," he clarified. "Not for you. We can build something that stands on both our names." She looked at him for a long moment. The wall between them had begun to crumble, but this was a step toward rebuilding something stronger. "I think I'd like that," she said softly. "But only if we're honest. Always." Ethan reached for her hand. Always. Meanwhile, Rachel sat in a quiet HR office downtown, a stack of printed emails in front of her. Her jaw was tight as she listened to the consequences laid out: termination, potential charges for fraud, and a recommendation to future employers that was less than flattering. No one had come to defend her, not even the clients she tried to win over with stolen ideas. And in that moment, she realized it hadn't been about talent. It had always been about control. Now, she had none. Back at Wildroot, Ava unpacked her first order of supplies: locally sourced vases, hand-dyed ribbons, native greenery. Ethan rolled up his sleeves to install shelving, while Cam brought in the first sample logo mock-ups. A new chapter was being written. One stem, one truth, one seed of trust at a time. The air inside Wildroot was thick with the scent of eucalyptus and hope. Ava sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by ribbon samples and boxes of dried lavender, while Ethan stood a few feet away assembling one of the reclaimed wood tables they'd sourced from a local craftsman. The hum of progress filled the room, but underneath it, an unspoken tension still lingered. It wasn't just about logistics or design. It was about them. "You've been quiet," Ethan finally said, not looking up from the drill in his hand. "Too quiet for someone surrounded by petals." Ava smiled faintly, running a strand of dusty pink ribbon through her fingers. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous." "Funny," she said, then paused. "About us." Ethan set the drill down and gave her his full attention. "Go on." She drew in a breath. "There's something about starting over that feels terrifying. Like I'm waiting for the next sabotage, the next betrayal. Even now, when everything is going right, part of me is bracing for it to fall apart." Ethan sat beside her on the floor, knees brushing hers. "That's not paranoia. That's experience talking." "I trusted you," she said quietly, looking at her hands. "And you were there for me in ways I didn't even realize, but I still can't shake that you didn't let me in, really in, until it was almost too late." He nodded slowly, his voice gentle. "And you're right to feel that. I let fear run the show. Fear of repeating old patterns, fear of being seen as a walking dollar sign instead of a partner. But I never feared you. That's what I should have realized sooner." She looked up at him, eyes damp. "I don't want perfect, Ethan. I just want honest. If we're going to do this, life, business, love, we have to show each other the mess, not just the highlight reel. I'll never hide from you again, he said, voice low but firm, even when it's messy, even when I'm unsure. Ava reached into the box beside her and pulled out a small, folded square of paper. Then help me pick. He opened it and grinned. 2 potential logos for Wildroot, both sketched in her hand. One elegant and clean, the other slightly rustic with winding vines. I like this one, he said, pointing to the vine sketch. It feels more like you. Messy? Rooted. They shared a laugh that melted some of the residual tension between them. As the afternoon light faded into a soft Miami gold, Cam dropped by with a fresh tray of pastries from the bakery next door. This place is going to be something special, Cam said, handing Ava a flaky guava turnover. People can feel when something's built on real love. Ava glanced at Ethan, then back at Cam. We're getting there. Cam raised a brow. Getting there is half the journey. Later that night, after the storefront was locked and the lights dimmed, Ava and Ethan sat on the small patio behind Wildroot. The city buzzed around them, distant but present. A string of fairy lights flickered above their heads. I was thinking, Ava said, about hosting a reopening party. For the shop? For the community, she clarified. Workshops, local vendors, garden games, something that gives back. Something that says, we're still here and we're growing. Ethan smiled. Say the word, and I'll make the calls. I don't want you to fix everything, she said gently. He nodded. Then I'll just be the guy who hangs the lights. She leaned against his shoulder. Deal. For the first time in a long while, Ava didn't feel like she was waiting for the rug to be pulled out. She felt planted, watered, seen. And, with Ethan beside her, not in front of her, not behind her, she felt ready to bloom again. The morning of Wildroot's grand opening arrived like the first bloom of spring, early, hopeful, and humming with quiet promise. Ava stood at the storefront in a soft, sage-green jumpsuit, adjusting the last stem of a cascading floral arch that framed the door. White peonies, coral roses, eucalyptus, and baby's breath wove together like a symphony of every season she'd endured to reach this moment. Ethan appeared beside her, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. Nervous? He asked, handing her one. Ava took a sip and exhaled slowly. Strangely, no. I thought I'd be terrified, but all I feel is full. Ethan smiled, brushing a stray petal from her hair. That's what peace feels like. People began to trickle in. Clients, neighbors, local artists, even a few past workshop students. Maribel showed up with a bouquet of wildflowers and a gentle apology in her eyes. Cam handled the welcome table with a clipboard and way too much energy, while live jazz floated from a trio tucked into the corner of the garden patio. It was perfect. At noon, Ava stood behind a small, wooden podium under a trellis draped with ivy and fairy lights. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice clear but full. Wildroot isn't just a studio, it's a story, of starting again, of holding on to beauty when everything else falls away. We built this space for growth, not just for flowers, but for people, for creativity, for community. She paused, eyes sweeping across the crowd, then landing on Ethan. And for trust. Because sometimes, the quietest love is the one that shows up when you need it most. The crowd applauded. Ethan's hand brushed against hers as she stepped down. She didn't pull away. As the afternoon unfolded, Ava led a floral crown workshop under the canopy. Ethan gave kids tiny seed packets with handwritten notes, and Rachel, conspicuously absent, was the furthest thing from anyone's mind. Near the close of the event, Ava pulled Ethan aside into the quiet back garden, where the sounds of laughter and jazz faded into the background. I was thinking, she said, fingers grazing the small potted herb beds they'd planted together a week ago. We should expand this space next season. Add a community garden, something open, something healing. Ethan lit up. I love that idea. We'll call it the Echo Garden, she smiled. Because good things leave echoes, right? He stepped closer. Only if they're real. There was a pause. Then Ava said, Ethan, I know I made you wait. For answers, for trust. But the truth is, I wasn't just protecting myself. I was protecting what this could be. And I think I'm finally ready to stop holding back. Ethan's expression softened. So am I. She slipped a key into his palm. It's to the back door, in case you ever want to come early and water the mint. Or just be here. He looked down at it, emotion tightening his throat. You're sure? I'm sure, she said. This time I'm not afraid of letting someone in, especially not someone who already knows how to stay. He pulled her into a quiet embrace, and for a moment the world narrowed to the scent of rosemary, the hum of bees, and the soft press of her heartbeat against his. As the sun dipped below the Miami skyline, casting gold across the glass storefront of Wildroot, Ava and Ethan stood side by side under the arch they'd built. She looked up at him, fingers interlaced with his. Ready for whatever's next? She asked. With you? He replied. Always. And together they stepped forward. Into love, into legacy, into a life no longer hidden but rooted in honesty, resilience, and a faith that bloomed from quiet, enduring care. Thank you for watching till the end. If this story touched your heart, made you think, or brought a tear to your eye, that's why we tell it. Stay with us for more powerful stories. See you next time.